Welcome everybody. Lovely Sunday morning, and we have Pranit here who has had a lovely journey through IIT and now doing research at EPFL, and would love him to dialogue with all of us on his journey and to take some learnings from from some interesting kind of, I would say, events and anecdotes that he has gathered. So this is the format is going to be a little different. Pranit would like to keep it as interactive as possible and base it on the questions that the participants get. He would also prefer everybody to keep their videos on so that he's able to see the faces behind the names in the participants' kind of windows. So Pranit, over to you.
Okay, cool. Thanks a lot for the invite. And yeah, like Pawan said, I'm here to share my journey since school. And yeah, I'll keep it kind of short about what I did, and then all the questions that you guys might have related to preparing for JEE or what goes on at IIT or kind of opportunities later. I'll leave it open to the questions. So yeah, let's begin. So I'll start with a quick introduction of myself and what happened. So I was born in 1992. I went to Bharati Vidya Bhavan in Pune for school from the first to 10th standard. Then after that, I was at Marathwada Mitra Mandal and parallelly Bagriwal tutorials while I was preparing for JEE. Then I went to IIT for 5 years for this dual degree course, which was a BTech and MTech in energy engineering. And yes, after that, I came to EPFL in Switzerland for some research for my PhD. And what comes after this is still a question mark, and hopefully I can update you after a few months. There are some questions here. Okay, yeah. Then yeah, so coming to the, let's say, the central topic of the talk is the first thing I wanted to touch upon is something related to motivation, or let's say staying motivated while preparing for JEE. And in the outline that Pawan provided, he mentioned some questions that I think people should ask themselves. And it really comes down to the central question, why, at least in my experience. So the first why begins with, okay, why is it worth clearing JEE? Or in my case, why is it worth even the extra year that I took? And yeah, there are various reasons for that. And then for most of us, when we start preparing for JEE or when we take the decision, it's based on things people tell us about IIT and why it's nice to go there. So yeah, here's first a short list of the things I already knew before I went to IIT about why it might be worth it. And then that is basically if you want to do or if you want to be associated with science, technology, engineering, and math in India, and if you kind of like the idea of making things, and if you're curious about science and technology, the choice of, let's say, a stream to study is most of the time engineering. And while it's not necessary to go to IIT to do really great stuff, the probability that you come across really good people, good professors, and good resources very high at IIT. So that was one thing people always told me. And this was a really nice reason to be motivated to try and prepare for JEE. Second thing that people usually tell you is that professors at IIT are usually experts in their field. And then you can always go to them for any kind of questions or curiosity or advice that you have. And the third, of course, the thing that the media loves to cover the most is that, of course, it's very hyped in the media, but it's true to a large extent that the opportunities for jobs and academics, or for that matter, whatever you want to pursue, there is a lot of open doors for these things at IIT. So now coming to some why reasons that I can share with you that I realized while I was studying at IIT. And then these I find are kind of more important because you hear the above three reasons from everybody, and there's nothing much personal about it. So coming to that, first is, so of course this I can say, or I can guess that it might be true for any kind of residential course, where the structure of the course at IIT says that you are kind of the master of your time. And if you find someone busy there, it's because they've decided to fill it up with activities. It could be more academics. You can pick up more courses. You could do projects which are related to your interests, or you could even spend all of your time with event management and organization with like the millions of fests that go on, or you spend time with your extracurriculars. So yeah, this I just made this slide to speak about the journey I spoke about, where I was at school in Bharatiya Vidya Bhavan in Pune, and then I went to college at Marathwada Mitra Mandal, prepared for JEE, and I was at IIT Bombay for 5 years, from 2011 to 16, and now I am at EPFL doing my PhD. So I guess I already spoke about these things, and yes, this is where I was, where when you're at IIT, you're really the master of your time. And what I mean by that is you get a lot of free time beyond the basic coursework that you need to do. And how to fill that up with other activities really depends upon you. And you can choose between a whole bunch of things. It could be more courses, it could be event or organization management, or could be spending time with your extracurriculars, be it, I don't know, video editing or music or sports, or whatever you like. And the thing is, the really nice thing is, whatever activity you pick, you will most of the time always find peers who are better at those activities than you are. And personally, for me, I'm kind of a let's say lazy and laid back person. So if you are also like that, and you want to end up doing interesting stuff, then IIT is a great environment because you see everyone doing something interesting. So it kind of pushes you to do those things. So since I spoke so much about what you can do just beyond the coursework, I'll kind of give you a taste of what can be done through what I did. So beyond the basic coursework, there is this push, which I guess you guys at DLRC already kind of get to do something with your time in terms of internships or projects or things like that. So I was lucky where I got to do two really interesting internships. One with an organization called Selco Foundation in Karnataka, where this is a social enterprise and they deal with, or they try and research engineering solutions for problems faced in rural India. And the project I was working on was trying to figure out how to use solar energy for cooking for large communities in rural places. And the second internship was at this university called the Weizmann Institute of Science in Israel, where I was working on this concept or this reactor, which kind of takes carbon dioxide and water, and you pass it through a fuel cell at very high temperature. And the expectation is that you get fuel from this in the form of carbon monoxide. So this internship at the Weizmann, I'll just use a better pointer. Yes, this internship at the Weizmann Institute of Science is what really laid the seed for, let's say, the desire to wanting to be in research and wanting to do a PhD in me. Because it really showed me that a lab is a great place, or it's almost like a playground if you're curious in that particular topic, and if that topic kind of starts concerning you personally. So these were about the projects and internships that I could do. Then I had the opportunity to do some interesting research at IIT, where I was again kind of working with a loosely related topic, where we were trying and making a material and studying that material to try and get water from hydrogen, hydrogen from water using solar energy. And lastly, of course, these were all of these activities, and everything that I say at IIT is usually until, let's say, 6 p.m. And after that, what I usually was doing was either spending my time on the tennis court or in the swimming pool. So these are the other perks of going to a place like IIT. They really throw all kinds of facilities at you. And then, yeah, like I said, you decide how to spend your time there. So now coming to, let's say, the last section um, of this, and wait, there was just another thing. Yes. So I spoke about why it's nice to go to IIT in terms of what people tell you before you get there and what you know from people. And then I spoke about what I understood while I was there. And the third part of the why is um, now that I passed out from there and I'm at another university or I'm outside the IIT ecosystem. What did I learn about IIT that I can kind of retrace, saying that yeah, I do feel the importance, or I do feel that things got easier for me. And the thing is not just about jobs, but the IIT brand is kind of real. And to be honest, I did not feel that until I started applying for jobs. So while I was doing my PhD, I always thought that, okay, no, not everyone knows it everywhere. But what I understood is when you actually apply to big companies for jobs, they kind of connect the dots. And they say that one of my friends' dads, he told me a very interesting thing, which is kind of humorous, but I believe is true. He said that if you go to a good university, be it anyone for that matter, in India or abroad, you are assumed to have a certain set of capabilities until proven otherwise. So you can kind of ride on that wave until whenever you can. So yeah, what I learned about IIT after passing out is that the brand is really real, and then the kind of network you get access to in terms of the alumni really goes a really long way. So now coming to some stuff that I'm doing now for my PhD, which is going to come to completion within a month. Like I told you, the seed for this kind of topic for converting carbon dioxide to fuel using solar energy was already laid during my internship in 2014. So that's what I ended up doing even for my PhD. So just to quickly explain the concept, since we're here. So the idea is to take electricity from renewable energy sources, take carbon dioxide from industries and vehicles and whatever houses which are using it for heating, and then pass it through a certain kind of reactor to use the electricity and the CO2 to make different fuels. So my project is concerned with what goes on in this reactor. Of course, this picture shows like an entire economy, and then there needs to be work in each of these sectors. But my project deals with this one and more about what goes on in there. So yeah, this is the example of the kind of reactor we use. And to go further in detail, what I do is to make these copper nanoparticles of different shapes to load it into this reactor. And then what happens with these different shapes is you kind of have the decision to make either fuels or chemicals. This is kind of an oversimplification, but just to give you an idea, suppose you have two different kind of workers in an industry. One worker can make better of one product and the other can make more of another. And in this process of turning CO2 into useful things, different shapes of copper nanoparticles just happen to be workers with two different skills. So that's what my research was concerned with. And yeah, that's what I spent the last 4.5 years doing. So in the end, I'll just come to some general suggestions and tips that I have for anything you try for that matter. Of course, this is quite personal. You could try it out and you could also disagree with me, but I just share some things that I think work for me. The first is, I think I have stuck to this throughout, like from JEE preparation days to my PhD, and I think I'll do it even further, is of course, people will give you all kinds of advice, but what's important is you try things out for yourself. You evaluate the effects of whatever you are trying critically and sincerely, and then you take a call yourself whether or not it's working for you. If it's working for you, you stick to it. If not, then you change something else. And to not know and to be clueless is not a problem at all. So what's nice is you admit it, say you don't know, you ask people. People are usually there to help, and then be open to being flexible. So if you think you've said something in the past and you need to stick to it just because you said it, but you know that you might be wrong, just be free and be open to saying that was probably not right and change your methods. This could even be about the choice of going for something as a career choice. People are free to like learning in the process of their decisions and then changing it at a later stage as well. And third is something that I think works again, is to set attainable targets in terms of your either your preparation or academics or any tasks that you want to get done. And then if you feel the targets you set were very easy, then you can improve, or let's say you can intensify the goal planning once you've achieved them. Because if you set really lofty targets in the start, then there's a high probability of getting demotivated. So for example, I can tell you that when I was preparing for JEE, I initially started planning for a week or 2 weeks and saying that, yeah, I have to finish all these topics. But then I noticed that if I just plan for 3 days at a time, finish that and then plan for the next 3 days, it was a lot more efficient for me, just as an example. So for you, it could be one day, it could be a week, or it could be even 2 weeks. So for me, it was about 3 days. And then another why. And yeah, again, it's for JEE preparation and any other motivation in general. If you want to kind of change your situation from where you are, or if you really want something quite badly, I think just answering that why you want that thing takes care of the other questions which I haven't spoken about, which are the how and the when and with whose help and all those things. So in my personal opinion, those things fall in place if you kind of just answer the question, why do you want it? So yeah, that was a quick summary about what I'm doing, what I was doing, and then I'm happy to take any questions that people might have. Or if you want to know more details about any of the things I spoke about. Yeah, I think Samantha has a question.
Yes, hello sir. I am Samata from Mumbai, and I am in the 12th grade. I've been preparing for JEE for the past 2 years, and now I don't know if you know, but the exam keeps getting postponed. I did give the first 2 attempts. So my question was, what would you? I mean, what are some of the tips that you would give me, because I just have, say, maybe 1 or 2 months, and because of the lockdown and everything, my first 2 attempts weren't great, and that is a lot of my friends were also in the same place.
Right. So the first thing I would say is use the first 2 attempts as experience for the exam environment, but don't keep your past performance as, let's say, one of the indicators of how you might do. So just focus on revising from a few books. I mean, it's hard to cover the entire portion of whatever questions you've solved each and every time, but I would just say maybe revise concepts and some key questions again and again. And those, according to me, really help you out in the exam. And yeah, like I said, don't keep the past results as an indicator of how you might do in the next attempt.
Okay, thank you. And if anybody else doesn't have any questions, that I kind of have a lot of questions, so yeah, I can either ask them now or in the end when everybody.
Anyhow, you can ask the moderator what he recommends.
Oh, that's okay. Shama, go ahead.
Yeah. So my next question was, so IIT is the best university for engineering in India, especially IIT Bombay. I think it's the best, and but it's not even in the top 100 institutes in the world, and it's still one of the most toughest exams to crack.
Yes.
So Do you think going to some institute outside India is better than going to IIT or yeah? So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so going to a good university outside can also be very advantageous, and of course the kind of education that might be there in a good university, I must say, can really be better. But I can speak for EPFL for that way. The kind of crowd that you see at EPFL, at least during the bachelors and even the masters to some extent, I would say the one at IIT was better. In if you really want to, like, let's say, feel the competition and kind of take advantage of it during your bachelor and master years. Because the thing at least universities in Switzerland is that they're easy to get into, but they're hard to get out of. So they literally admit everyone, but the course is heavy. So in terms of the peers that you might be with, I would say the experience at IIT is already quite good. But at the same time, um, when you live far away from let's say a surrounding that is familiar to you, I think you can learn a lot more. You are really thrown out of your comfort zone, and then you have to learn to really live on your own. So this can be seen as a pro as well as a con. So if you prefer to be closer to your family in the age group of, let's say, 18 to 22, then I'd say it's a little early to go abroad. But then there are people who can really manage themselves well, even when they're 18 and 19. So in that case, I would say it's not a bad option at all to go abroad. But if you do decide to stay in India and you uh, have the chance to go and study at IIT, it's certainly not a disadvantage compared to any other good universities in the world, because most of them have their doors open to students from IIT for higher studies.
Hi Pranit, I actually posted the question in the chat because my younger one is reading something next to me.
Okay. Let me just have a look at the chat. Yes. So it's the one about, okay, the one about ICER, right? Yeah.
Yes, yes, that's right.
Yes.
I mean, yeah, I mean, from what I understand, he seems to have pursued his interest. So it seems completely fine and nice. And so I went into engineering, and then at some point during my final year at IIT, I realized that, okay, if I kind of don't go into fundamental science now and do a PhD, I might not come back to it later. So yeah, to me, it seems like your son, he picked his interest over what people are just telling him. So it seems fine. So I went into research because I really like the idea of playing around in the lab to kindle my curiosity while trying to provide some scientific information that could be of use to someone. So this is my understanding of fundamental science. And yeah, if that is his interest and he already went in that direction, it's quite nice. If did I answer your question, Shama?
Yeah, Pranit, I think it will be also great in case if you can basically just share that if the research environment in IIT,
Okay.
while doing undergraduate, and the research environment at an institute like ICER. So is there any comment on that, on the comparison?
So the thing is, I think I don't know too much about the research environment at ICER because I haven't experienced it, but I can speak for what happened at IIT. I have some friends at ICER who said it's quite similar, and they had a good experience doing research. But yeah, at IIT, of course, the facilities were great, and then in fact, during my 5th year, the thing is the undergraduates aren't expected to do much research in the first place, which is kind of a sad thing. But then whenever an undergraduate student shows up saying that he wants to use the facilities, people are more than happy to help, and they're quite forthcoming and helpful. So as far as ICER goes, unfortunately, I don't have any first-hand experience, but I expect it to be at the similar level in terms of the facilities we get. And just to give an example, if you have to use, let's say, an electron microscope for your research, I know for a fact that outside the IITs and ICERs, you have to go to other institutes or organizations that have such a microscope, for example, and the waiting period could run into weeks. And at the same time at IIT, I just had to walk up to the place where or to the operator who ran the machine, and it was done for me within a couple of days. So this is just a game of numbers, where where there are fewer people who want to use the facility, and you just have more access to it. I would expect ICER to be on the similar level. So should I go on to the next question by Janvi?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, 8th grade. Okay, I didn't even know I wanted to prepare for JEE when I was in the 8th grade, but I can tell you what I used later. So I would recommend sticking to a few books and then really understanding the questions in them well, as opposed to trying to cover as many books as possible. So for physics, I used, I can go for each subject. For physics, I used H.C. Verma, the 2 volumes, and a book called, I think, Physics MCQs by the Bharati Bhavan publications. And the third was the past papers of IIT JEE entrance exams. For chemistry, I think there was NCERT, the NCERT books, and the past papers. So past papers is a common thing you should really look at for each subject. And for maths, again, our professor was really good, and also we use the Arihant series of books for specific topics like calculus or coordinate geometry or let's say complex numbers. So yeah, I'd say use a few books, and generally all these books, there is a lot of overlap in them. So that's why I say stick to a few books and then do them really well. That would be my advice.
So are these online courses on Unacademy, etc., good for preparing for this IIT and all? Or like I should stick to books and self-study or something? Can you give some tips on that?
So according to me, most of the effort does come from self-study and understanding the concepts yourself and a lot of practice. But so I would suggest sticking to a few sources, but being consistent with those sources, because if you try to go for too many things, then you might waste time doing the same things over and over again. But again, if there is access to, let's say, the instructors on these courses for specific doubts, I would imagine that they're a good place to use. For example, if you're getting stuck in some concept and you need someone to explain it to you, then yeah, I'd imagine such sources could be nice. But again, I don't have first-hand experience there because I didn't use these online platforms when I was preparing.
Did you do any course or something? Or you only followed some kind of books?
I did go for coaching actually for all the 3 years.
Okay.
So yeah, I was basically whatever place you go to for coaching, if you kind of follow what your instructors ask you to do, and you do a lot of practice yourself, it should be kind of a good method to make sure you're progressing.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Should I proceed to the next question myself?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay, someone asked me about the career prospects in India about this branch. So I'll just mention the branch again. So I did my BTech and MTech in energy engineering. So to begin with, the branch itself is very mixed, and the curriculum we study is really, really mixed. And what I have learned now, after passing out from that branch, and also from after learning from my friends who have gone for various streams, is the exact thing you study during your engineering or during your bachelor's does not really restrict you to remain in that field throughout your life. So for instance, I did, and a couple of more of my friends who did stick to this field, we did. Um, but the process at IIT, and maybe what you do even for a few years immediately after that, is more about how to pick up skills and knowledge that you think you might need for your work and then use it. So this is a skill that I said is central to learning and to continue development in any field. And yeah, from that point of view, the branch doesn't really restrict you. But at the same time, if you want to stay associated with that branch, the contacts that you can get through your professors who are field experts themselves at IIT are really nice to go further into that field. So for example, if I wanted to pursue a career in solar energy in India, then one of the professors at IIT is really one of the foremost experts in solar energy in India. And then there were a lot of opportunities and resources for me to go down that line. At the same time, if I wanted to go into, let's say, power electronics, there was a professor who has really close ties with the railways, who said that, yeah, students who are interested can always pitch into such a project. So yeah, avenues are always available, and this branch is kind of so mixed that a lot of companies who want a diverse skill set are interested in hiring people from this branch.
And in the same breath, Pranit, can you also mention about you talked about how companies found diverse, I would say, capabilities, people useful to recruit. But at the same time, you did mention once that earlier, not in this talk today, that there were challenges that other companies were facing in recruiting people from energy engineering from IIT Bombay.
Right, that's true. So since energy engineering is or was, let's say, a relatively new branch, a lot of big companies just didn't have it in their procedure to open for this department. So that is one hurdle that we did face while applying for jobs and internships, is that the skill set or the curriculum that the students have gone through was relevant in many cases, but it's just that the company didn't know that they had to open up for this department as well. And that hurdle was crossed by having some engagement with industry, and we have these student internship and job coordinators where they really have to pitch and go to the company and tell them that, yeah, hi, we are also this department who study things very related to what you might need on the job, and we'd like it if you are also open to interviewing our candidates. And yeah, so those struggles did exist. Thanks for pointing that out. But they're addressable to a very large extent through dialogue. Yeah, I think we spoke about the books. Someone said, okay, when should I start the preparation for IIT? Like I said, I started only in 11th grade. But the thing is that the general kind of, let's say, skills or the kind of habits you need for JEE preparation, I think that can help you in general in any place, which are just basically being curious and sincere and disciplined. So if you're ready to take away that conclusion from the JEE preparation, then I'd say starting early is also not a problem. Like Janvi was saying, she's already interested in the 8th grade, but I wouldn't recommend going all in for JEE preparation while just shutting out on all other kinds of hobbies and activities, because that, I think in the long run, it doesn't serve the purpose. So yeah, if you're interested in science and engineering, preparing for it early is not a bad thing, but don't shut yourself out from other activities and interests. About the JEE score. Okay, this I really don't know. Pardon me for that. Score is 99.44 percentile. I don't think I can answer that because we didn't have the percentile system, and I don't have a good measure of what that can fetch you. Sorry. Okay, and Urvi says there are. Okay, so I'll just read Urvi's message. So she says there are two ways to prepare. One is conceptual understanding. Second is memorization. How did you balance the two, and what is the best strategy? Okay, nice question, because you will find people on both sides of this argument. Some will really demonize memorization to the extent that it feels like it's some sin. And others will say that, okay, conceptual understanding is too slow. But then the thing is, you have to learn which method works better where. So for example, in math and physics, it's quite hard to memorize, and even for most of chemistry, I'd say it's quite hard to memorize. But there is one section in inorganic chemistry where it's basically just a whole bunch of information which you need to remember. So there, of course, you have to resort to memorization. So if they say that, yeah, a certain element has certain properties, and this is what happens when you react it in a certain way. If you really want to understand it, you can spend time looking up on Google or other resources to understand why the material behaves that way. But in the interest of time, where you really have to cover a lot of ground, you can tell yourself, okay, that for now, let me just remember this, and in a way that I can recollect it if a question is asked. And if I'm interested, I will look up further details for myself. And yeah, that's how would I say. So there is no clear-cut method that, okay, do it only by conceptual understanding or only by memorization. You kind of have to choose which one works better where. And as far as uh, the other two subjects are concerned, physics and maths, and again for most of chemistry, when you stick to the same books and then you're going through the same concepts again and again, to a large extent, you do end up remembering things automatically. So you don't have to try and memorize it, but just by making sure that you've understood it well, and then looking at the same concepts over and over again, which are key to most of the syllabus, you do recall them. So what is memory in the end? Just recalling that information that you had read before when you really need it, right? So I think understanding something really well does help you memorize it as well. But again, I'd encourage you to pick your strategy according to the amount of time you have and how deep you're willing to go into understanding it. So the next one, okay, which universities would you recommend for postgrad in energy engineering in the US? Okay, so there are there are a bunch of universities where you could go to in the US, but in most of the cases, what I experienced was, at least while I was applying, a lot of universities don't have energy engineering as a direct degree. It's always let's say it's always part of another department, and depending on what you kind of specialize in during your own undergraduate studies in India, you apply to that specific degree in the US. So for example, I have a friend who applied for a master's and PhD in material science, because towards the end of the energy engineering degree, that's what he was interested in. I came to this department at EPFL into the chemistry and chemical engineering, because yeah, the work I was doing was more related to this field. And yeah, the work I was related to was doing this field. And I also have friends who went into economics after energy engineering. So it really depends on what you want to specialize in, because yeah, in most cases, that's the whole point of postgrad in doing a postgraduate in any field, if you want to specialize more. So energy engineering itself is quite broad. So if you want to go more specific, I would recommend looking into specific departments. I think those were all the questions in the chat. If I've missed something, you can remind me.
Yeah, I think now people can just raise their hands and ask questions, or just ask. You don't need to raise your hand, please.
So may I go?
Please.
Yeah. Hi, Pranit. This is Aman here.
Hi.
I'm going to start facilitating physics and maths in DLRC
Nice.
this session.
Mhm.
And I'm going to facilitate maths and physics. So my first question to you is, what would be your what would you say to a person who is going to facilitate maths and physics at a place like DLRC? My previous experience has been fairly in a very conventional setting, but what would you just advise to someone who is going to facilitate maths and physics in DLRC? That's one. And my second question is just connected to the first one is, how do you think I can facilitate the attitude of community research in students? So I'm not attached to IIT training program at DLRC. I'm just going to facilitate maths and physics for high school. So irrespective of whatever they choose to prepare for, IIT or not, it all depends on. I think it all depends on the attitude of science, which is basically wanting to explore and figuring things out. So so how can you connect that attitude to community problem solving? And since you are working with energy, I'm also interested in energy sustainability of especially rural community and community around DLRC. So how can I connect everything using my teaching?
Okay, nice. That's interesting. I'll come to the first one first, obviously. So if I'm not wrong, you asked me for let's say any kind of advice, suggestions.
Yes. So, like if you were to talk to your physics teacher back then, what did you now say to him, so on and so forth, something like that? I don't know if I'm making sense.
Yeah, no, it's fine, because we discussed this with Pavan often, that okay, how do you kind of improve teaching or get to students more? It's like if you can kind of motivate the students, or if you can ask them, or let's say make them realize why this could be useful, so this is generally how I start most of my presentations related to research. Even the first slide, it's telling you, okay, why am I even talking about this topic? It's like Q Padu, because so for example, if I remember when I just started reading up about organic chemistry, I had no clue about why is everyone talking about carbon so much in this book. It's like, why so much carbon? Nobody told me that. And then I was just clueless. Okay, why am I reading about carbon again and again and again? But then if someone told me that, okay, 99% of whatever you touch everywhere around you is just carbon and hydrogen, I was like, okay, yes, now it makes sense. It doesn't hurt to know more about this. So if you kind of tell that, okay, ये पढ़ा तो इससे क्या होगा? I mean, ये पढ़ने के बाद और क्या समझ सकते? And so that's how I would try and motivate anything. And then I would stress that, of course, you have to explain the very concepts you are dealing with. But I would encourage kind of trying to figure out how you want to learn for the students. So they need to question not only the concepts, but also they should question how they want to learn, and then extract that from the facilitator. So the students are free to, let's say, try and drive the session to how they want to understand things. And then I believe that when all of the students do this, then it can drive it in a nice direction. So I don't know if I answered.
No, yeah, perfect, makes sense. Yeah, because I may have my own way of looking at things, and I may drive my session through that. There might be a little bias, kind of bias there, but letting students drive their session and wanting to know how they want to enter and explore this concept makes really sense. Thanks. Sure.
And yeah, generally I would suggest, like, using informal language in the class really helps students be at ease and ask the questions. Because many times there's apprehension of thinking that a question might be silly, or I believe there is no silly question. So students should really be open. And the second one is, I think it has something to do with concern, that if you're concerned for your surroundings, you kind of want to try and make it a better place. And then it goes to the last why question that I said during the presentation, that if you are with everything that's going around you, and congratulations, I'd say you are in a very comfortable place. But if you're not okay and you really want to change something, then it pushes you to do things. So I think you should ask yourself, okay, सब ठीक है क्या मेरे आजू बाजू? ठीक है तो ठीक, very good. ठीक नहीं तो कुछ करो. That's all. So yeah, as far as engagement or let's say as far as driving people toward community research or help goes, I'd say it has something to do with engaging more with people. Also saying that, okay, if we come together, we probably can come up with solutions to problems. And honestly, this is one of the biggest complaints I have against science. So let's say the papers that we publish, it's already quite specialized information, and then once we have all our results, we work for, let's say, a month or two in just writing it. And that is also meant for a highly specialized audience.
True.
To the extent it doesn't make sense, but of course, while you're in this game and you have to play it a bit.
Yeah.
So I think even scientists need to engage more with, let's say, the general public.
Right.
And help them connect the dots about, okay, what I'm doing and why I'm doing, or how it might help even a decade down the line. So I think engagement is a good way to kind of address this.
Sure, that really is thank you for bringing that up. Actually, I've always thought that the gap between the citizens and the ones who are doing research has widened to such an extent that they almost feel that they are somewhere out there, and it happens in closed citadels of research and so on. And my intention ultimately through my teaching would be, no, it may be a requirement. Yeah. You may need sophisticated environment and protected environments for doing certain kind of research, but it doesn't need to have that image. It can trickle down to the larger community. Yeah.
True.
Thank you for that, Pranit.
My pleasure. I mean, I hope I answered.
So I'm a pure science student in 11th grade, and I've pretty much decided that that's what I want to do since I'm so passionate about it.
Okay.
But at times I feel that if I do one bachelor's course or something in engineering or some type of a course at a lower level, I may have prospects or something of that sort. Now, I'm not fixed that I do an integrated program like you did of 4+1.
Okay.
I'm open to doing a separate bachelor's, separate master's, maybe at different colleges itself. But if you are passionate enough about some field, would you recommend doing something like this or just going all the way in pure science?
So the thing is, I'll try to answer your question, but I might be a bit biased by my own experience. I can admit that. So what I'd say is once you go into pure science, I haven't seen too many people move into engineering later, but I have seen ample examples of it the other way around. So if you do engineering, I've seen many people, including myself, move into, let's say, more fundamental science later. But again, this is anecdotal. I haven't seen it go the other way around.
So I'm talking about the way you're talking itself, from going from engineering to pure science. Is the transition smooth, or is there any advantage for doing a bachelor's degree too in pure science?
So if you talk about the PhD, I have friends who did their bachelor's and master's in pure science, but from whatever I have seen, everyone struggles to the same extent in a PhD or during fundamental research, no matter what you did before, because a PhD is a PhD for a certain reason, right? You are trying to answer questions which nobody knows the answers to.
Yes.
So, I mean, from that point of view, it's kind of similar. But if you think about career choices, I think engineering gives you more flexibility if that's what you want. But if you're really interested in pure science right now, just wanting to be flexible, I wouldn't recommend it. So if you're super interested, just go for pure science. It's it.
Yes,
But
so
yeah,
because I am very interested in pure science. In fact, particle physics. So I'm hoping to maybe work in Switzerland itself.
okay.
But the thing is, I'm also interested in space research, and for
Okay.
what I've understood is for any form of experiential space research where you practically do experiments in outer
Yes.
space,
Mm-hmm.
recommend you to have some sort of an engineering background. So I don't
Correct.
know if it changed or not. So that was the only reason I was wondering.
Okay. Okay. So this becomes a bit specific. Yeah, if you're talking about space research, I don't know much about it and the requirements. I would imagine that there's always a team with people having different capabilities.
So
And
I'll
of course,
think about that. Thank you so
sorry,
much.
sorry. Okay, if I answered your question, then fine.
So what suggestions or advice would you give to someone who is very confused with their, interest? How would you, go about, to help them find their calling and figure things out?
Okay, so what I'd say is, yeah, everyone seems to be in a hurry to find out their calling. I'd say that what you decide now does not tie you to be that or do that for the rest of your life. It's always possible to be flexible and change your path later. So I'd say that, yeah, consider your current interests and see what opportunities are available. And if choosing something right now does not tie you to it forever in the future. So people find their calling even after they're 30 or 40 sometimes. You don't have to find your calling when you're 18. So that's what I would say.
So IIT JEE, is it a good option, to just prepare and then on the side try to explore, try to figure out? Uh, is that a good option?
Yeah, I mean that considering the market and the kind of opportunities that you get just by being at IIT, it's not a bad option at all. If you're not sure what to do in terms of, let's say, which field of engineering or science, but if you think you don't want to be directly involved in science and engineering, I'd say maybe you're interested in something else, then you're probably better off spending your time doing that in a more intensive fashion, because JEE preparation does take a lot of energy and effort and focus. So if you're vaguely interested in science but you're not sure what to do, I think the whole experience of JEE preparation can tell you things about yourself if you're honest and critical. Yeah, that's what I would recommend. But yeah, I would just, as a general advice, not put too much stress on finding your calling when you're like 16 and 18 and even 21. I mean, it can come later. There's no problem.
Okay, thank you.
So looking back, if you look at your last 5 years or 6 years journey, if you were just to, revalidate, instead of doing BTech and MTech from IIT Mumbai, if you would have done it from your present institute or let's say an institute in the US, would it have accelerated or exposed you to a better or more latest research or learnings or findings in any manner? Would it have helped you actually?
So that's a good question. So if I wanted to continue in exactly the very field that I am in right now, my answer would have been yes. So if I wanted to go further into pure science and then just stay in research or academic research for the rest of my life, maybe going into a more specialized degree from the start in like a more world-class institution would have helped. But the thing is, I'm someone who really likes to keep experimenting and trying different things. And for example, the opportunities that I'm looking at after my PhD aren't related to academics. and then I'm open to exploring different fields of engineering loosely related to energy somehow. So from that point of view, I think my degree at IIT did give me a really diverse set of exposure. So for example, when I'm discussing something related to solar energy in my lab here, so my lab is like 90% of the people are chemists, and most of them don't understand the jargon that comes from engineering or anything related to solar energy when I'm talking specifically about that. So in such times, I find myself at an advantage where even like some simple things, I know it just because I've heard it before, and people don't. So I imagine this happening in many instances because of let's say the mixed degree that I had at IIT Bombay. And again, my long-term goals are to come and do something back home in India. So I think the degree at IIT will help me more than a degree that I could have had from another university abroad.
Sure, thanks. So basically, you mean that your base groundwork was prepared very well from that. My other part of the question would be, so would it give students more exposure by being in any other universities? Uh, is it helping them in any manner being there in that environment?
Yeah, so one of my close friends, he did go for his undergrad already to a university abroad, and I think he made really good use of it, because when you go to another country, right, for your bachelor's, you really have to learn to be independent and think for yourself, and you're really outside your comfort zone. So I think between his school years and if I speak to him now, once he's done with university, there's like a huge difference. And I think for personality development and independence, it's probably nicer to go abroad already. And yeah, in terms of exposure, of course, that really depends on the candidate to a large extent, because information is available everywhere, and sometimes you have to fight for it, and sometimes it's just available sitting in front of you. And the probability that information is just available easily in front of you is quite high, even at IIT. And I'd say the difference between IIT and universities abroad is learning to live by yourself more than just the exposure.
Sure, I agree. Thank you so much for the answer.
So I just have one more question.
Yes,
I
yes.
know that I'm open to a separate master's and a separate course, bachelor's degree, like 3+4 or 4+, so whatever the format is.
Okay.
So do you recommend taking this or that? Because what I felt was in a longer course, when you take separate bachelor's and master's, maybe it gives you more time to think about what field you're in. What field you want to, and after that studies, the next 20-30 years you can continue working in that field properly. But on the other hand, maybe an integrated course may not give you that time to find out, or is it, or am I wrong in this?
So again, I'd say that, let's say you go to an integrated course. So for the integrated courses at IIT at least, and I'm not sure if it's the same at IISER, the final year gives you an insane amount of time to think, and you could either use that on your project, which is your thesis, or you could use that time to ponder upon what you want to do later and apply for those opportunities. So that point of time, you get more time to think while you're doing the degree. But again, if you do a bachelor's first, then the decision comes 1 or 2 years sooner about what you want to do next. So if you already know what you want to do next, you can start it 2 years sooner. So it's an advantage. But again, if you're unsure, sorry?
So taking an integrated course doesn't like rush your decision in any way or anything, right?
Like, I mean, again, yeah, I think the idea that it's a rushed decision comes from the fact that you think you have to stick to it later. So if you're open to being flexible even after you finish the degree and go into something new, then in fact, it gives you more time to think about what you want to do and not less.
So it's possible to change your field after the degree. I didn't know that.
Totally. So I have friends who like, I have a couple of juniors who went into data science now after an energy engineering degree. Then myself, I'm into chemistry now. And then, yeah, I have I have another friend who is an entrepreneur in the energy engineering field. Then I have another friend who's just making sensors, and that is his company. Another friend is doing design. So you can really go into anything. You don't really need to restrict yourself.
Oh, okay, and you can also do a second degree if you would like in some other field, right? Like a second master's. That's possible, right?
Yeah, totally. I've seen people doing multiple masters as well.
Okay, thank you so much, sir.
Yeah.
Does anybody have any more questions? If you don't have any more questions, actually, I have one question, Pranit. Is that one is that is it easier to get into EPFL than into an IIT?
For the bachelors, and
yes,
definitely, definitely, you can walk in here. If you live here, you can walk in here, literally. But from what I've heard from the bachelor students, is it's hard to get out of EPFL, not get in.
And when I meant it for Indian students. So you have mentioned earlier that the facilities are good, and maybe the only thing that you require is to know French. So is that
French, yes, and Switzerland is very expensive to live in. So when you're a bachelor student, there's really no other real income. So for a PhD, it's really fine because you get paid a stipend here, which is great. But for the bachelors and masters, the education in Switzerland is great, but it's very expensive to live in. So if there's someone who can afford it, then I'd say, and you can learn French or German, I'd say Switzerland is a great option. But yeah, the financial aspect is kind of a hurdle.
Sure. And to get in, basically, I mean, they can find information on the website, right?
Yes.
Great. I think it's in general good to have these comparisons. And in the other question which I had is from you have invested one more year in your JE training and you gave it after 3 years. A is that, can you point out certain, for lack of a better word, mistakes that you think you did in your first 2 years of preparation?
Yes.
That could actually kind of give some leads into what not to do, and especially it's coming from somebody who kind of is concerned with students in a JE batch right now. We have 5 students right now in a JE batch of about 10 who are preparing for JE. And the second question is that I think in the first question we can take the second one.
Okay. Yeah. So for the first one, actually there are 2 points. One is that many people have you believe that the JE syllabus is a big ocean and it is endless, but that's not true. There are a restricted set of topics that you need to cover, and then stick to the same resources and take a particular resource that has a good diversity and do it again and again, because questions might not repeat themselves, but a lot of concepts repeat. And then if you really know how to navigate yourself through a particular set of questions which employ a whole bunch of concepts, they do come to you in the exams. So it does really help. Second is, I believe like the best way of, let's say, surviving or getting out of competition is to not pay attention to it. So many people will have you believe that you need to aspire for a rank in JE, but I don't think it's a good idea. You should just focus on how much you score. The rank will take care of itself, because you can't influence the rank directly. How much ever well you score, your rank depends on how badly or how good others are doing. So I would recommend just focus on understanding the concepts and practicing the questions yourself. The rank will take care of it itself. So don't get dazzled by competition. I'd say be aware of it, but don't pay much attention to it.
Hey, that was very useful. And the second question was that out of your experience of your peers, have you seen that these are have you seen a class of students who you would say that, hey, these kind of students should not even think about IIT, or there are, I mean, it's waste of a seat as well as they're wasting their time too.
So, I mean, I don't know if 50 is an overestimation or 50%, but at least 30 to 35% of students at IIT have no clue why they came there, at least. So the reasons why they came there are the three reasons that I shared on the slide, which says that, okay, why should I go into IIT? Things that people tell you. They're there just because of that. And in many cases, they didn't really have a choice. So they just told, okay, this is what you need to do. So yeah, there are a whole bunch of people who would have probably been better off somewhere else. I don't know if it's counted as a wasted seat because they still use the resources and the network somehow to contribute one way or the other. So I don't really subscribe to the wasted seat logic, but for the student themselves, they could have probably done better somewhere else. But in the end, I don't know if it's just the social conditioning, but anyone you ask, or at least 90% of the people, even if they feel they would have been better somewhere else, they say that nahi, fayda to ho gaya, because they have lifetime access to the network and the contacts.
Great. Pranit, as always, it's a pleasure to dialogue on your learning journey and the other things that you've been doing. And thank you, everybody, for coming over on this Sunday morning and adding in to this in a participatory way.
My pleasure.
So, great. So, looking forward to have you guys over for the upcoming webinars, and you will also get an email from me about updates about the coming up webinars. And keep safe and have a great Sunday. Bye, everybody. Thanks, Pranit. See you.
Bye.
Take care.